Road Gang Radio. We've talked about making a living. Now let's get a life. It's Jimmy Mac and Lindsay Lawler with the best stories, the ultimate road trip, the concert of a lifetime, and a home when you're not at home. The wheels have come off, but we're still rolling.
Immediately after this wonderful show, and we've actually gotten a chance to onboard Lindsay. I love saying the word onboard. It just feels so corporate. We've actually welcomed Lindsay in the last half hour. So thrilled to have her. Lindsay,
you didn't welcome me. I shoved myself in.
Well, I mean, when it comes to you, there is no difference. Trucking with OIDA this week has been really terrific. It has been very veteran-centric, and anybody who heard Michael's interview knows how much the people who served are important to us. Important to us for two reasons. One, thank you for your service. Two, many of them point the way to a better future for trucking as we move into the 21st century, into the newfangled technologies. The expectations are going to change. We need people who can improvise, adapt, and overcome. We need people who actually follow the principle of the objective. We need people who can actually, in many ways, do the workplace equivalent of a triathlon. They continue that focus on veterans today on Trucking with OIDA. Jennifer Siebold, the executive director of the Veterans Community Project in Longmont, Colorado, knows the struggle too many veterans face all too well. She dedicates herself each and every day to helping. That's what the Veterans Community Project does, and that's why OOIDA's Truckers for Troops campaign has dedicated itself to supporting that nonprofit. Jennifer is going to walk Scott and Ashley through how you can as well, and the difference even a small donation can make. Then Lee Cooper, Veteran Service Officer for the Larimer County, Colorado Veteran Service Office, is going to be joining Scott and Ashley. His job description is both simple and complicated. Simple in that his day-to-day is dedicated to helping the vets in need, but complicated because providing that help is often accompanied by, wait for it, bureaucratic red tape, which is the bane of B.J. Ganem's existence, and headaches. It's enough to make you feel helpless, but luckily there's an antidote for helplessness: action. And that's what Lee Cooper is going to be focused on when he joins Scott and Ashley on another edition of Trucking with OOIDA, coming up immediately after this show. RadioNemo.com, Road Gang Radio, Nemo Nation. We should write.
Right? Do you like tater tots?
I love tater tots if, in fact, they are crispy. No soft tater tots.
Oh, yeah,
Really, really, really crispy on the outside and really, really, really hot and tasty on the inside. That's what I'm looking for.
Well, I ask because every time you talk about OIDA, which is a lot,
here it comes.
Every time we talk about OIDA, I want them to team up with ORIDA. Tater tots.
My name's Tater. I'm muscular and tan. I'm sorry. I'm bringing it back.
Yeah, I just need OIDA to do some work with ORIDA. It just makes sense. I mean, owner-operators need crispy tater tots. That's all I'm saying. Hey, I'm also wanted to let you know that I can speak from experience and tell you there maybe not a shortage as we think, as much of a shortage as we think in truck drivers, but there is a shortage in bus drivers. There is a shortage in bus drivers.
You looked it up, didn't you?
No, I know it because my bus for my kid didn't show up today. And we get a text. And by the way, my daughter said yesterday after school, Mommy, Miss Julie's going out of town. That's her bus driver's name. And I was like, that feels like a problem. And sure it was. At 6 a.m. I get a text, or 6:30 this morning, I get a text that says, whatever bus she's on, will be running 70 minutes late today. 70 minutes late because they've got another bus driver has to go do their full load and then come back and get this load of kids. So luckily I live in a great community because my husband's out of town and I'm on the air with you here right now, right when I would have been driving her to school. So luckily a neighbor took Freya to school. But first of all, it made me very sad for some kids that just have to stand at the bus for 70. Now I just got another update. Now it's 80 minutes late. Some kids just have to stand there because their parents had to go to work. Or some kids stand there because their parents didn't get the text. And it just made me really sad, but it also made me realize we need bus drivers. They don't pay them enough.
There you go.
It's the most responsible. It is the person that if I was in charge of their salary, I'd give them all my money. I'm just putting my child into my 6-year-old into a bus and sending her out in the world. Why are we paying these people pennies? Anyway.
Welcome to the United States of amnesia, where we actually forget to pay the people who actually take care of most of the living and dying in this country. It's a house of madness, by the way. Welcome to Road Gang Radio. Welcome to Lindsay Lawler. Welcome to Jimmy Mack. Welcome to Phone Master Dre. And, welcome to... So is author Matt DeLorenzo. He is a longtime auto journalist, having been the editor of Auto Week, a staffer at Automotive News, and both Detroit editor and editor-in-chief at Road and Track magazine. Come on now. He has authored several books, including he has published a number of books, Legendary American Cars, Modern Chrysler Concept Cars, which, by the way, was the winner of the 2000 Best Books Award from the International Automotive Association, and Mustang 205. He is joining us this morning on Road Gang Radio. Perfect place for him to kind of come and join us, by the way. We are talking about his new book, Mercedes-AMG RACE-BRED Performance. And we want to say good morning and welcome to this freaky, feisty, flinty, and really fun Friday, Matt DeLorenzo. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. How are you?
Really good.
Really good. We're happy to have you here. And I'm going to kick off, Matt, and let you know, I'm going to be honest. I'm not a car person. I wasn't a car person until I finally, a couple years ago, drove something I loved. And then I'm like, oh, I get why people are car people. But I do drive a little Mercedes because if I'm being completely honest, I liked the badge. That was it. There was nothing more to it than I liked the badge. And I think that's maybe a lot of people. Not because I know what's going on under the hood. But your book actually made me realize that I may be accidentally sitting in a machine with a race car alter ego rather. And so I just got started to dive a little deeper, and it made me realize, like, when we do buy things passively and not really dive a little deeper what's going on. So can you walk me into this world of just kind of basic level, what makes AMG the unhinged side of Mercedes?
Well, I think that's a really great point of view, Lindsay. So we see a lot of things that have badges, and you say, well, I want to get an AMG because it's the most expensive, so it has to be the best. The thing about the book is that it tells the story behind that badge. And it's really fascinating because it's about a couple of engineers who worked for Mercedes in the 1960s. And they wanted to go racing at a time that the factory had enough. They had gotten out of Formula One racing in the mid-50s after a big accident at Le Mans. They still continued to race in rallies and touring car, which were closer to the production vehicles they were doing. But by the mid-60s, there were management changes, and they decided that they no longer wanted to race. Well, these two young engineers, they were still, building race cars on the side and that kind of thing. And they left the company and started tuning Mercedes, which was unheard of at the time because Mercedes were perfect automobiles. And they actually built quite a reputation in building performance cars for both racing and the street. And they became so successful that Mercedes eventually bought them in 1999 and in 2005 turned them into the performance division of this legendary luxury brand.
In many ways, they're heretics. I mean, the idea that I thought about that as I read the book. I said these maniacs are heretics. I mean, if in fact Mercedes is a religion, these are the guys who actually are creating this offshoot sort of radical version of a Mercedes. And for many of the purists, it's like, what in the hell are you doing here? And ironically, like all heretics, eventually, if you don't get basically run out or crucified, you end up actually getting to run the show to some degree. and I'm kind of curious in regards to pigs being able to fly. And of course, you make that joke early on in the book to kind of talk about the past here, about that red pig, because everything's got an origin story, and to kind of set up that development, which you track, both in beautiful language, but also in a gorgeous spread of a book. If you guys have an affection for any of this stuff or know somebody who does, this is a great gift for anybody who loves this world. It's a great thing to both kind of show off who you are, and it's a great thing to kind of spend some time with going through and jumping through and enjoying the text. Talk about your own experiences with these, but also talk about the origin point of this story.
Sure. And, I really have to give a lot of credit to Mercedes-Benz because they opened up their archives to me. There's over 300 images in the book. And I went down some remarkable wormholes to find some pictures, especially back from the early days. And the car that you mentioned, it's called the Red Pig. This was in 1971. Mercedes themselves were their egos were bruised a little bit because car magazine editors were telling them that they were building cars for retirees and farmers and taxi cab drivers. So they had a big limousine called the 600 that had their first V8 engine in it. So they decided to take this engine and stick it in the what it was at the time the S class, the 300 SEL. And it turned out to be quite a performance car. It was dusting off 911s and all that. So it helped their reputation on the street. But an engineer tried to take the car racing at Spa in 1969, and the management got cold feet, and they blamed it on tire wear. But the morning of the race, the Mercedes withdrew the cars from the race. 2 years later, AMG was back with a similar car and entered it, and it was a big red 300 SEL, a giant car among racing against things like Ford Caprice, which were smaller, sportier cars, and even a Camaro with a V8 engine. And it was so big and fat and loud, people referred to it as the Red Pig. Well, this car ended up finishing second in this 24-hour race and first in its class. And that really put AMG on the map internationally in terms of being able to provide performance cars for both racing and the street.
I want to take it from one more place there too, because the tinkering is what kind of goes on here. Because the courage, I call them heretics, and there's also a certain level of unbelievable courage here. We were talking about this in regards to baseball. Somebody made the comment that genius is figuring out what your purpose in life is, and then doing everything you possibly can to ensure that is all you do for the rest of your life. I mean, the idea of going where they went and doing what they did involved an incredible risk for their own careers, because there's a good chance if this blows up in their face, they're never working again, right?
Right, and it's interesting. They set up shop in this old mill building in a town called Bergstall. The AMG also refers to the A as Hans Werner Aufrecht, who stayed with the company pretty much through its sale to Mercedes, and then Erhard Melcher, the M. He was the mechanical genius. He left the company early on, but he was associated as a contractor doing a lot of the engine engineering for Aufrecht. And the G part is Gross Ospach, which is the town that Aufrecht was from. But they had set up in this town called Bergstall in this old mill. And there's some pictures of this place. And they had lifts outside for the cars. They actually had a dirt floor in there that they dug a pit so that they could work underneath the cars. And it was because of these primitive conditions. And they also had their contemporaries, the young engineers, moonlighting with them, helping to build these cars. The older engineers at Mercedes kind of treated them with contempt and called them garage tinkerers, or what we would call shade tree mechanics, because they intimately knew the cars because they worked at Mercedes, but they were really turning out, they were giving privateer racers these cars that were winning races. And at the end of the day, that's all that counts is, can you go faster than the other guys? And AMG was providing that to a growing clientele.
I just want to give a quick quote here before Lindsay actually throws a question your way. Melcher summed up the early business nicely in the AMG 45 anniversary book, saying, "With us, customers found respectable-looking, long-lasting Mercedes models with good safety features that could also be driven fast. Some customers entered these cars in hill climbs and rallies. In AMG trim, they could compete with sports cars of the time, and they still had all the advantages of a Mercedes-Benz." And that is kind of the core of how they made all of that work. I just wanted to kind of let people know what kind of information is living there and how this is all kind of assembled. Lindsay, the pictures, by the way, look like a really classy the early stuff looks like a really classy 1960 science fiction film. There's some really kind of newfangled technologies that now look really retro-futurist in it. It's a really groovy book. Go ahead, Lou.
Well, I just have the balance of the luxury plus bulk. That's why, by the way, I really want a G-Wagon, but I want a gold matte one because I think I'm a rapper. But I like it because it's like, it's like luxury, but it's also a tank. Anyway, but you kind of answered this with the race story, but I think people, myself included, love the moment that, the rebels get invited in, so to speak. And so kind of two thoughts behind that. I'm, curious about the idea of when did these two engineers, Hans and Erhard, look at this perfectly polite German sedan and go, let's turn this into a monster, which obviously gets us into the Red Pig origin story. But and then with that, what's the moment the Mercedes said, okay, fine, you're part of the family now? Because to me it does feel like we balance out, and that's when we get luxury plus.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that Melcher and Aufrecht met in 63, I think 63 to 64. And Aufrecht was a bench engineer. He did all the testing of the engines. And Melcher was a mechanical engineer. He did the designing. And they didn't like each other. They would leave like little notes. And I found a picture of like a engine test cell. And I put that in the book because I said, this is probably where one of these cells is where Melcher and Aufrecht met. And they had different ideas on how to do things. So there's stories about them leaving, like snotty notes in the log books and saying, this should be tested this way, this, back and forth. But Aufrecht soon recognized the mechanical genius of Melcher and said, hey, I understand what you're doing. And at the time, the racing program was winding down, and on the side, they built their own racing engine and put it in a car. And they went to their boss and said, hey, we've done this thing. This car's really fast. And the boss said to them, well, if you race it, you better win. If you don't, you're out of the company. Well, they went out and they won. They won the 1965 touring car championship. Unfortunately, the guy who was their driver passed away in another race. And then, again, management came down on him. There's no record of the 1965 races that Melcher and Aufrecht won with this car while they were working for Mercedes in the Mercedes archive.
What a bummer! What a
I
bummer!
had to go elsewhere to find, but there are records of them actually competing and winning in this thing. But at the point, they weren't high enough up in the food chain to where they were accepted. This underscores the whole, they're young, they're crazy, all this other stuff. So it actually wasn't until 20 years later in the U.S. or around the world they were doing their tuning thing. They would take customer cars, they would pull the engine out, they would beef up the engine. They introduced a car called the Hammer. Car and Driver magazine gave it that name, but it was an E-Class Mercedes with a big V8 engine, and it was really fast and very expensive, but it developed a cult following. At the same time, Mercedes was racing in they got back into racing, and they were in the German touring car series, and they weren't doing very well. So they invited a couple of tuners, and one of them was AMG to work on the cars. And AMG did such a good job. They ended up building all the race cars for the DTM, and they won for Mercedes. And that got upper management's attention finally, that these guys knew what the heck they were doing and that they should have a closer association with them. So it wasn't until 1990 they signed an agreement to where AMG cars could be sold through Mercedes dealers they're still independent companies. In '94, they co-developed the C36, and then in 1999, Mercedes began the acquisition process and own them today.
One of the things, Lindsay, that kind of moves through the book too is that people forget that, not our listeners, by the way, many of whom are not only over-the-road truck drivers, some of them actually haul Mercedes for a living. But what's really cool is that people forget that when you have a racing division or you have people that are souping up what already exists, it actually helps the overall performance of people who are just getting regular Mercedes. So many people who actually get a new car often be like, yeah, these tires are fine, but these aren't the tires I want. They really are at the forefront of helping people figure out what the best tires are, all kinds of other things that people, when they customize their own Mercedes, heretics, all of them, but they really are at the forefront of this, aren't they? That they help a lot of culturally at large Mercedes owners kind of figure out what they want to do to kind of amplify the performance of their just regular old Mercedes, right?
Yeah, the owners of these cars pretty much are ambassadors, actually, for the brand, and in their social circles, they're the car guys and gals, the experts. And when somebody has a question, I'm thinking about buying a car, they look to these people and say, what are you driving and why do you like it? And, if it's got an AMG badge on it, you kind of go, well, that's really cool. And then they can actually tell you why that badge is there and why it's worth the money. So it's the people who find these cars and help develop the brand actually by buying them and using them is another important part of the story as well. And Lindsay, you're talking about the G-Wagon. That's one of their most popular AMG models, by the way.
Oh, really? I was going to ask. Okay.
They started tuning G-Wagons back in 1979 when the G-Wagon first came out. So, they were in business. They wanted to make money and they wanted to survive. So whatever Mercedes came out and you brought it to these guys, they'd do something to it. They'd yank the engine. They'd boost the horsepower. They eventually moved from this little mill in Bergstall to this town of Aufrecht where they are today to have a bigger facility so that they could do a lot of the appearance stuff that AMG is known for today, like lowering the car, putting on these body kits and special wheels and paint jobs and do all these interiors. There's a picture in there. One of my favorite cars is like an SL from the mid-'90s that is all yellow. The interior is yellow. The wheels are yellow. I mean, they were in business to make money, and they'd give whatever the customer wanted. So, and they were very successful at it.
I love that you said that they would bring it. You bring it in, and they would change everything. It reminds me, Jim, my favorite line from Father of the Bride. When they're looking at the wedding venue, comes in, he's like, "Oh, this is nice. It's perfect. We change everything. We change everything." That's what I feel like here.
Exactly.
And so as Jim mentioned, a lot of our audience are over-the-road truck drivers. A lot of them haul Mercedes, but so a lot of them will understand this. But for those men and women listening now, what should they know about AMG that anything, as you would say, that translates from racing to the highway?
Well, there's actually sort of three levels of AMG that you can buy these days. There's AMG line, which is just basically appearance stuff like wheels and tires, and they have a different grille pattern, sports seats, things like that. You buy that through your Mercedes dealer, and a lot of that stuff is installed right at the factory. The second level are AMG prepared cars that are like a C-Class, that type of thing. Some of them will have engines that are hand-built by a single technician in Aufrecht and installed in the car. And then the third level are cars that are specific to the AMG brand, like the GT and the GT Coupe. And then they built this one car. This is where the racing really crosses over into the road car thing. They built this car called the AMG ONE. It's a hypercar. It basically adapted the Formula One engine to a road car. And they built a limited number, a couple hundred units of these things that cost over $1 million a piece. But that really those cars are very rare, very collectible, but it really did bring Formula One technology to the streets, and it's a pretty remarkable achievement when you see one.
I'm going to do my thing where I go to left field here for a second, so I hope you guys will.
Jimmy Mack goes to left field.
Thank you very much. There is a group of people, whether it is Arthur Miller or Drew Carey or whatever hipsters you see on television, those people who somehow manage to be cool while wearing Coke bottle glasses. I'm talking about those people who are so nerdy that they are chic. There's a thing about all of these cars that feels that way too. They feel like nerd cars that nonetheless are badass. And I kept thinking about it. I had to kind of scroll back through to find it. The one that had the checkered flag upholstery. I just kept thinking about that is like one of my favorite things. And for some reason, they almost seem like these boxes to some degree that are like Mr. Potato Head or anything that you can personalize, where it's kind of like I got this blank canvas. They feel more like a blank canvas in many ways than a lot of other cars do. And maybe I'm just making stuff up as I go along here, but does that feel right to you, that it really, for all of its kind of precision in its construction, these cars feel like now it's up to you? There's something about it that they saw in that original moment, beginning with the Red Pig, where they said, you know what? This is great. This is kind of beautifully balanced and doesn't need to be tuned up. But what if it was? Does that feel right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that if you look at the 70s, it was when they started doing the personalization of the cars. And they did such a good job at it. After they had acquired, Mercedes had, after they acquired AMG, they were heavy into the personalization, and that program actually grew to cover all Mercedes. So now Mercedes has this thing called manufacture, spelled out in a German way with K's and stuff like that. But you can go into any Mercedes dealer and do that level of personalization to where you can have your own color, you can specify materials and patterns and all sorts of things. So, I think that that's one of, it'll cost you a lot of money, but I think that that's part of the services that car makers from Ferrari, all these high-end car makers, they want to offer that level of personalization because they feel that, like you said, everybody has their own expression. They may be nerdy looking, but it's still cool. And this is a way for them to meet those needs, and they also make money from it. So it's kind of a win-win.
We've been talking with Matt DeLorenzo. The book is Mercedes-AMG RACE-BRED PERFORMANCE. You can find it wherever you get your books. Yes, Amazon as well. Buy it, put it on your coffee table. It's beautiful. And I'll wrap up with this, Matt. Fastest car you've ever been in?
Fastest car I've ever been in. I think I got a chance to drive a Bugatti Veyron once. I didn't, it's like a 300 mile an hour thing.
Whoa.
Or 200 I'm 300 kilometers, which is like 200, but I didn't get it up that fast. But that's like the fastest car I've been in.
But you could have. I could have,
but I don't. There's a big self-preservation gene here that doesn't.
I'm right there with you. I'm right there with you, Matt. I'm right there with you, Matt. We got to take off. Is there any socials that you want to point anybody towards before we have to shuffle off this radio coil?
No, it's just basically go to Amazon. I do have a website called Tightwad Garage, which is another thing that I do, and the book is on there as well as other stuff that I've done. But basically, when it comes to my own personal cars, I'm kind of a tightwad, so I write about cheap cars as well. So I cover
You'd be in the wrong business. You'd be in the wrong business if you weren't a tightwad, actually. You'd be screwed. So good on you.
By the way, Matt, next time, pro tip, after a magnificent interview, I only have one piece of criticism: always lead with Tightwad Garage. Author Matt DeLorenzo is a longtime auto journalist and the editor of having been the editor of Auto Week and a staffer at Automotive News, and so much more. This book is wonderful, Mercedes-AMG RACE-BRED Performance. Thank you, Matt.